When Jesus spoke of a fig tree blossoming and vultures circling a corpse, he wasn't painting random images. He was unveiling a mystery. These vivid metaphors cut to the heart of Israel's destiny, a story of destruction, renewal, and waiting. What if these signs weren't just ancient riddles, but prophetic markers pointing to Israel's future on the world stage? In the first century, Jerusalem fell and the temple was torn down, leaving Israel seemingly without hope. Yet Jesus promised that the fig tree would blossom again, a symbol of political renewal and national restoration. Still, before his return, Israel would remain like a lifeless body, awaiting the breath of God's Spirit, as foretold in Joel and Ezekiel. This tension between renewal and lifelessness raises the question at the heart of prophecy: will Israel be restored? Does the destruction of the city and the temple signify that God has severed his relationship with the nation of Israel? Jesus would disagree with this interpretation. The Olivet Discourse not only offers hope to Jesus' followers, but also provides hope for the people of Israel. The hope of Israel encompasses not only resurrection and inclusion through Christ, but also the return to the land and spiritual renewal, which are deeply rooted in prophetic expectations and covenant promises. The prophets consistently speak of a physical regathering of Israel to their ancestral land, Ezekiel 36:24, Jeremiah 30:3. This return is portrayed not merely as geographic relocation, but as a sign of divine faithfulness to Abrahamic and Davidic covenants. Paul, while emphasizing spiritual fulfillment in Christ, never dismisses this hope. In Romans 11, he affirms that God's promises to Israel remain and that their future restoration is part of the eschatological plan. The restoration of Israel serves as a significant prophetic sign. Acts 3:19-21 mentions that Jesus will remain in heaven until the time comes for restoring everything, as the prophets have foretold. This restoration encompasses Israel's return to the land, spiritual renewal, and national redemption. Many people point to 1948, when Israel was reborn, and 1967, when Jerusalem was reunited, as crucial moments that began the end-time clock. These events fulfill prophecies such as Luke 21:24, which states, "The Gentiles will trample Jerusalem until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." The prophets Ezekiel 36-37, Jeremiah 30-31 describe a twofold restoration. First, a physical regathering to the land, followed by a spiritual awakening marked by a new heart and a covenant. Paul affirms in Romans 11 that Israel's partial hardening is temporary, and that all Israel will be saved, linking their restoration to the fullness of the Gentiles and the return of the Messiah. The restoration of Israel is not just a geopolitical event, it's a theological milestone. It signals that the stage is being set for Jesus' return, as the covenant promises to Abraham, David, and the prophets converge. Before we move forward, let's pause and retrace our steps, recalling the foundation we have laid in understanding Jesus' teaching. Earlier in the day, Jesus declared that the temple would be destroyed. That evening, he also stated that not only would the temple be demolished, but the city of Jerusalem would also face devastation. Jesus taught his disciples that this impending destruction would fulfill Daniel's prophecy in chapter 9, and he urged those living in Judea at that time to flee to the mountains before the event occurred. This event would signal the beginning of the Great Tribulation. We also learned that Jesus' rule over a political kingdom would not take place immediately, and that there would be a substantial delay between the destruction of the temple and his return. We discovered that this pivotal event would mark the beginning of a Great Tribulation, and that the tribulation would last for the entire time of the gospel witness, affecting not only Jewish believers but also Gentile believers.
Then if anyone says to you, "Behold, here is the Christ," or "There he is," do not believe him. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told you in advance. So if they say to you, "Behold, he is in the wilderness," do not go out. Or, "Behold, he is in the inner rooms," do not believe them. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather.
Earlier, we noted the discouragement and loss of hope one might experience during a prolonged exile and Jesus' delay in his return. Given the physical and emotional pressures that one might encounter during the Great Tribulation, one might be tempted to seek another Messiah and listen to those who bring false hope. Jesus cautions his readers about false hope in times of distress. He says, "If anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it. If they say, 'He is in the wilderness,' do not go out, or 'He is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it." This warning is not just about deception, it's about desperation. In the chaos of the Great Tribulation, when suffering intensifies and hope seems distant, people may crave immediate relief, even if it comes from counterfeit sources. Jesus anticipates this vulnerability and urges his followers to remain anchored in truth. The wilderness and inner rooms symbolize secrecy and exclusivity, claims that the Messiah has returned in a concealed or elite fashion. These messages appeal to those longing for escape or certainty. Still, Jesus insists his return will be unmistakable and universal. Matthew 24:27, like lightning that comes from the east and is visible even in the west. This warning echoes the pattern of false prophets throughout Israel's history, those who promised peace when judgment was near, Jeremiah 6:14. It also reinforces the need for discernment and spiritual endurance. The true Messiah does not hide. He comes in glory, and his appearing will not require secret knowledge or privileged access. Suppose the Great Tribulation is understood as the ongoing suffering and persecution of Jesus' followers, both Jew and Gentile, throughout history, rather than a future climactic event. In that case, this passage serves as a warning against deception throughout the entire church age, not just during an end-time crisis. Jesus' warning about false Christs and false prophets, verses 23 to 24, applies not just to a final moment of chaos, but to recurring movements and figures throughout history who claim divine authority or messianic identity. The great signs and wonders they perform are not necessarily eschatological fireworks, but spiritual counterfeits that have misled believers across centuries. The warning against pursuing hidden truths, such as statements like, "He is in the wilderness," or "in the inner rooms," verse 26, serves as a critique of secret revelations, sectarian claims, and localized spiritual movements that promise exclusive access to Christ. This interpretation encourages believers to anchor their faith in the public, scriptural testimony of Christ, rather than in charismatic personalities or private visions. The true return is unmistakable. Verse 27's imagery of lightning highlights that Christ's return will be visible and undeniable to everyone. This stands in stark contrast to the subtle and deceptive nature of false claims throughout history. It underscores the fact that no human movement or leader can replicate the glory of his coming. When Jesus says, "See, I have told you beforehand," Matthew 24 and 25, he's doing far more than offering a prophetic forecast. He's equipping his disciples for endurance, discernment, and trust. He equips his disciples with a shield against deception, anticipating the confusion and spiritual danger that will arise throughout the church age. By telling them in advance, he provides a framework for discernment so that when false messiahs and deceptive signs appear, believers can recognize them as counterfeit. Our faith is anchored in his word, and so his forewarning affirms that God is not reactive, but sovereign. He knows what's coming and prepares his people. It echoes Isaiah 48:5, where God says he foretells events so his people won't attribute them to idols or chance. Knowing that Jesus foresaw these trials helps believers endure suffering with hope. It's not random or meaningless. It's part of a redemptive arc. As events unfold, his words become a source of confirmation. He told us this would happen. Jesus models a teaching style rooted in preparation and clarity. He doesn't just warn, he explains, contrasts, and contextualizes. This invites believers to study prophecy not for speculation, but for spiritual formation. We should take a moment to realize that Jesus is not a distant prophet. He is a present shepherd, guiding his flock through history with foresight and care. In Matthew 24:28, Jesus says, "Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather." This is often read as a cryptic image of judgment or the inevitability of spiritual decay attracting divine reckoning. However, in this context, Jesus' proverbial saying is an allusion to Ezekiel 37, which strongly resonates with the theme of return from exile and a national restoration. The bones represent the whole house of Israel, scattered, lifeless, seemingly beyond hope. When God begins to assemble them, bone to bone, sinew and flesh, the image echoes the physical return from exile. Despite the restoration of form, the breath, ruach, is absent until God explicitly sends His Spirit. This illustrates that returning to the land does not equal complete restoration, a powerful reminder that spiritual renewal must accompany national regathering. If Jesus' prediction is inspired by Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones in Matthew 24:28, one could argue that the physical regathering of Israel, a nation reassembled but not yet spiritually revived, occurs before the dramatic celestial signs described in verse 29. Furthermore, if our interpretation is correct, this suggests that a regathered Israel would be strategically positioned to witness the sign of the Son of Man. Returning to the land of Israel, particularly around Jerusalem, the city of prophetic anticipation, positions the people at the heart of the eschatological narrative. This resonates with Zechariah's prophecy that the Lord will return and set foot on the Mount of Olives, Zechariah 14:4, directly connecting a specific location with divine revelation. Matthew 24:30 mentions a sign that will appear in heaven, visible to all the tribes of the earth. If Israel is regathered and geographically realigned with Jerusalem, its people will be the first to see and respond to this celestial event. This true sign will stand in stark contrast to the false signs mentioned in verse 24, making it even more striking. If we are right, God will use this spiritual tension to His advantage. Just like Ezekiel's bones had flesh but no breath, a physically restored Israel without the Spirit is present, but not yet transformed. The sign of the Son of Man could be what triggers mourning, awakening, and ultimately revival, as Zechariah 12:10 says, "They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn."
Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you too, when you see all these things, recognize that He is near, right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away.
If we suppose that the corpse mentioned in Matthew 24:28 symbolizes Israel, which has been physically restored but remains spiritually dormant, then the fig tree sprouting green leaves in Matthew 24:32 serves as a powerful metaphor for spiritual awakening and the imminent fulfillment of promises. In biblical traditions, the fig tree often represents growth, renewal, and readiness. Its green leaves indicate that summer is approaching, offering a seasonal metaphor for spiritual fruition. Spiritually, the appearance of green leaves suggests a transition from dormancy to vitality, resembling the breath that enters Ezekiel's reassembled bodies, Ezekiel 37:9-10. It is a long-standing view in biblical scholarship that this generation, Matthew 24:34, is not merely a temporal marker, but a reference to the enduring existence of the Jewish people. Jesus may be affirming that the people of Israel will continue to exist throughout the unfolding of prophetic events, remaining as a visible, historical witness to God's covenant faithfulness. Romans 11 echoes this view, where Paul discusses Israel's ongoing role in salvation history and the ultimate promise of national restoration. The endurance of this generation could be seen as a guarantee that Israel would survive dispersion, persecution, and exile, and still be present when the final signs appear. It supports our earlier argument that the corpse in Matthew 24:28 is a regathered, yet spiritually waiting Israel, and that the Jewish people are positioned to witness the sign of the Son of Man. Coupled with the fig tree parable, Matthew 24:32-33, This interpretation suggests that the sprouting of the fig tree, new life, and spiritual awakening will happen within the lifespan of this persistent generation. Our thesis unfolds a rich tapestry: the Jewish people regathered yet waiting, the sky trembling with signs, and the promise that they will not pass away until all these things come to pass. As we close this chapter of Matthew 24, we're reminded that the path of discipleship is marked by enduring tribulation, a refining fire stretching across the church age, testing the faith and resolve of Christ's followers. Yet amid deception and struggle, Jesus offers a sign: the fig tree. Its budding leaves whisper of Israel's physical restoration and spiritual renewal, a prophetic bloom signaling that his return draws near. The trials are real, but so is the hope. The signs are not just symbols, they're invitations to stay awake, stay rooted, and stay ready. We're building a space for honest, grace-filled discovery. If that sounds like something you want to be part of, subscribe and click the bell to stay connected. Thanks for watching.